Yeah.
Yiratzon Parashat Mishpatim, the limud שבלרפואת כל החולים, ובתוכם טניה בת הודה מרגלית, יוסף יאיר בן אביבכה והרב סימון בן סימה, ולעילוי נשמת Reb Bruce Weinreb zichrono livracha. When we enter into Parashat Mishpatim, we were challenged. From the beginning of Torah till now, we've seen stories. Stories about Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, exile, redemption. And suddenly we enter into a section of the Torah that's, we could call it boring, detail-oriented, and, really difficult to relate to. And it's important to really figure out, why is this essential? And more than that, is there something about the details that's symbolizing something more significant than we think it is? So, Parashat Mishpatim brings us into the details, into the mundane, into the rituals of regular, difficult, challenging lifestyles. And the transition from Parashat Yitro is that Parashat Yitro dealt with inspiration, connection, motivation. You can already see Bobos is feeling excited. So that was Parashat Yitro, and it's an example of Roni here, that really you feel this connection. And then you transition from that connection to a Parsha dealing with details, but more specifically, the detail that it opens up with is slavery. And the obvious question is, how is that essential? Why do you transition from inspiration to slavery? And more than that, the Jewish people just finished slavery. They were slaves for so long. That's not the thing that maybe you need to speak to them about right now. Says the Sfat Emet in the year 1886, it isn't only dealing with the actual slavery, but the symbolism of slavery. Says the Sfat Emet that the pasuk that describes the experience of slavery says, Ve'ish kim kol et bito le'ama, which is translated, when a man sells his daughter to slavery. It's presented in a language that's ideal. Ve'ish kim kor, that a man decides to sell his daughter. All of us who are parents know that none of us are ideally going to sell our children to slavery. That's not something that any parent would think of as ideal. So the question obviously is, what is the Torah describing slavery in language that's saying as if a man should sell his daughter into slavery? Says the Sfat Emet something miraculous. Doresh al haneshama. Says the Sfat Emet, this isn't only dealing with the actual decision of selling into slavery, rather into the symbolism of the difference between our body and our neshama. What does this mean? Every one of us live with intention. A lot of us have goals to run a marathon, to be on a healthy food diet. Those stem from the neshama. They're pure, they're authentic, they feel like there are no borders and no limits. Our bodies are the ones that convince us that it's probably better to sleep another hour in the morning. And when you have to take out the garbage, it's probably cold outside. And when you have to take care of your children, then you may be just like, we give them a phone and they, use it. Whatever it is, that's the goof. And there's tension between the neshama and the goof. Says the Sfat Emet, what we don't realize is that the tension between the neshama and the goof is not something that should be one or the other, but they need to affect each other. They need to understand that they cannot live one without the other. And when it says Ve'ish kim koret bito, says the Sfat Emet, the bat is a symbolism to the neshama, and the ish is the symbolism of the goof. And a lot of people think that they don't need each other, that they need to be different from each other, that they need to choose, am I a business-oriented person, or am I a Beit Midrash-oriented person? And they do not think that there is a connection and relationship between the two. Says the Sfat Emet, Doresh el neshama ki yesh prinat ben ve'eved ba'avodat Hashem. that really when we relate to Hashem, there's an idea of a ben and an eved. And the ben and the bat are the neshama, and the eved is a slave. And when the father decides to send the bat to avdut, it's saying that we send the neshama to the guf, and that's why the Torah describes it as an ideal. Because the ideal is to understand that they can relate to each other, that they can assist each other, that they are not a contradiction. They are not in war with each other. And that's why we have to understand that the first thing after Ma'amad Har Sinai is the description of avdut, meaning that we sell our neshama to the guf. The question obviously is, why? Why is it important to transition the bat or the neshama into the eved and the guf? And the idea is that an eved is just covering the identity. Every eved was born a child. There was never a situation where there was ever a slave in the world that was born a slave. They were born as a child. That's their identity. And later, for whatever reason, they need to realize that they are also covered by an eved, but the covering of an eved is not a problem. And it's not a punishment. It's an opportunity to use the neshama as something that can transform the guf to enable the neshama. And so if we bring this down for 1 second, I was speaking to my best friend, and we spoke about when you build a new yeshiva or a new community in Israel, what's the first thing you build? And I told him that my Rebbe Rav M teaches that the first thing you build is a basketball field and a soccer field. And the obvious answer is, that doesn't make any sense. Unless you view the physical activity not as a contrast, but as an ability to shine. Our bracha as we enter into Parashat Mishpatim is to know that yes, we will deal with the world of avdut. And it comes immediately after Ma'amad Har Sinai to inform us that we must realize that the greatest privilege of Shabbat is Motzei Shabbat. The greatest opportunity of tefillah is the moment after. And the most important element of every Beit Midrash is the door. Because they force us to understand that it's not about something as an experience, rather as a lifestyle of transformation. We should have a Shabbat as we enter into the details of Parashat Mishpatim, that we embrace the opportunity of using Ma'amad Har Sinai to infuse the most mundane details of our life. Shabbat Shalom.